Millionaire arrives unannounced. He was shocked to see a black employee praying with her mother. The night draped over the city like a sheet of velvet, skyscrapers glowing in fractured reflections across the glassy river. Far above the quiet streets, a single black sedan glided to a stop in front of a towering corporate headquarters. The automatic doors sighed open as Michael Trent stepped out, his tailored navy coat catching the silver glow of the streetlights. 42-year-old Michael Trent, self-made millionaire, investor, and CEO, was a man accustomed to control. Tonight he arrived without notice, a shadow in his own empire. His polished shoes struck the marble floor with a crisp rhythm, each echo bouncing through the cavernous lobby. Security guards sprang upright, startled. One of them fumbled with his ID scanner. "Mr. Trent, sir, we weren't expecting." Is there something we can prepare for you?" a guard stammered. Michael offered a polite but distant smile. "No, I just need access to the executive floor. I'll be reviewing reports." "Carry on." The guard nodded quickly, eyes down. Michael strode past, the scent of freshly waxed marble lingering behind him. The elevator hummed upward, carrying him to the 32nd floor. Inside the gleaming capsule of glass and steel, Michael's reflection stared back at him. A perfectly pressed suit, salt and pepper hair, eyes sharp but tired. He checked his watch, not because he was late, but because routine demanded precision. Wealth had bought Michael everything: silence, power, obedience. Yet, in the elevator's mirrored walls, he saw a man surrounded by abundance, but hollowed by its weight. The doors slid open with a soft chime. The floor was deserted, lit only by the dim glow of computer monitors in sleep mode. Michael walked the corridor, his footsteps the only sound. He loved this emptiness. The building felt like a kingdom asleep beneath his rule. Inside his corner office, he dropped a leather briefcase onto the desk and began sorting quarterly reports. Numbers filled the screen, profits rising, expenses shrinking, shareholders satisfied. But tonight, the figures blurred. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. Another quarter. Another record. And still, the words trailed off. He exhaled sharply, irritated by a longing he couldn't name. For years, success had been his only pursuit. Yet each new achievement left him emptier, like adding bricks to a wall that hid a growing void. Then a faint sound drifted through the silence, soft, melodic. Not mechanical like the hum of machines. Not distant traffic. Something human. Michael tilted his head. A song, hymns, barely audible but unmistakable. A gentle harmony threading through the sterile air. He stood, curiosity prickling like static. Leaving the reports behind, he stepped into the corridor. The sound seemed to come from deep within the floor's break area, where no one should be at this hour. Michael followed the music past shadowed cubicles and darkened meeting rooms. The faint glow of a single light spilled into the hallway. Each step slowed as he approached. For a man who commanded entire markets, mystery was rare. Yet tonight, something soft and unexplainable called him forward, like a memory half remembered. He stopped at the edge of the break room door. The music was clearer now, a woman's voice, low and steady, carrying words of gratitude wrapped in quiet strength. Michael hesitated. His hand brushed the cold metal of the doorframe. He couldn't remember the last time he heard anyone sing without purpose. No performance, no profit. Just faith. The melody stirred something buried. A childhood church his mother once dragged him to. The smell of old wood and candle wax. The tremor of voices believing in something unseen. Michael exhaled, shaken. From inside the room, a second softer voice joined the hymn, frail but warm. Two voices now entwined in prayer. Michael leaned forward, the edge of the doorway framing a glimpse of figures in shadow. He saw movement. A young woman kneeling, head bowed. Beside her, an older woman's thin silhouette sat in a chair, hands folded. The younger woman's words drifted into the hallway. "Thank you for the strength to keep working. Thank you for today's blessings, small as they may seem." The older voice answered with a whispered, "Amen." Michael's chest tightened. The break room, usually cluttered with vending machines and stale coffee, had transformed into a sanctuary. Michael Trent, millionaire and master of numbers, had built a life immune to surprise. Yet a simple hymn, rising from the heart of a night shift worker, began to chip away at the fortress he called success. He stood frozen, the melody filling the sterile air, carrying with it an unease he could not name. For the first time in years, Michael felt small, not because of failure, but because something larger than profit hummed through the walls of his empire. The hymn faded to a gentle silence. Michael lingered in the doorway, unseen, a man on the brink of a revelation he did not yet understand. The break room glowed with a single overhead light, casting long, soft shadows across the scuffed tile floor. Michael stood in the doorway, the cool metal of the frame grounding him as he peered inside. His breath caught before he could stop it. Kneeling on the worn linoleum was a young black woman, her back straight, her hands gently clasping those of an older woman seated beside her. A foil-wrapped meal rested between them like a fragile offering. The younger woman's head bowed in reverence, her quiet words weaving through the silence like threads of light. "Thank you for the miracle of today's work," she whispered, her voice trembling yet steady. "Thank you for giving us strength when we felt weak, for every breath my mother takes. Please, Lord, carry us through another night," the older woman echoed softly. "Amen," her voice barely more than a breath. A thin oxygen tube curved along the contours of her face, the gentle hiss of air mingling with the quiet prayer. Her skin carried the fragile sheen of illness, but her posture radiated a serene dignity. Michael's eyes swept across the scene, cataloging details as if trying to memorize a language he had never learned. The mother's shoes, worn, soles frayed, were tucked neatly under the chair. A small plastic container of soup rested on the table, steam curling upward in lazy ribbons. Their clothes were simple but clean, every button fastened, every fold smoothed with care. There was no extravagance here, only devotion and discipline. Something inside Michael shifted. He was a man accustomed to boardrooms where every conversation held an agenda, where silence meant power. Yet here, silence felt sacred. The air seemed alive, pulsing with a warmth foreign to his world of contracts and quarterly reports. He could hear his own heartbeat as he watched the young woman, Naomi Carter. He suddenly remembered from an employee roster, whisper gratitude for things he had long stopped noticing. Breath. Work. Survival. Michael stepped forward instinctively, then froze, catching himself before the sound of his shoes betrayed his presence. He felt like an intruder, a trespasser on holy ground. His empire, built on relentless ambition, had given him penthouses and private jets, but it had never given him this. He had never prayed over a meal, never held another's hand simply to share faith. Naomi's voice wavered but did not break. "Give me strength to keep working hard," she murmured, eyes still closed. "Help me care for my mother until she's well. And if that day never comes, help me stay grateful for every moment we have." Michael's throat tightened. He thought of his own mother, long gone, who once worked late shifts so he could dream of college. He had buried those memories under layers of success, convincing himself that wealth could erase the vulnerability of those years. But standing here, he felt the sharp edge of remembrance cut through the armor he wore like a second skin. He noticed the mother's trembling hand resting over Naomi's. Despite the weakness of illness, her grip carried a quiet strength, a reassurance passed from one generation to the next. Michael's chest ached with a feeling he couldn't name, something between envy and shame. His eyes flicked to the foil-wrapped meal again. It was modest, perhaps the simplest dinner in a building worth millions. Yet it radiated a richness his catered banquets never offered. He thought of the lavish dinners he attended where laughter was polite and empty, where gratitude was measured in dollars. Here, gratitude was raw and unfiltered, a lifeline stretched between two hearts. Michael leaned back slightly, his reflection faintly visible in the break room's glass door. For the first time in years he felt small. Not small in the humiliating sense of failure, but small in the presence of something larger than wealth, something he could neither purchase nor command. He imagined the endless spreadsheets and performance reviews that defined his days, the machine of business that rewarded profit while ignoring the people who kept it running. How many Naomi Carters worked late into the night, unseen, unheard, carrying burdens far heavier than deadlines? How many prayers were whispered in quiet corners, while he sat in his penthouse counting victories that now felt hollow? The hymn they had been singing earlier returned faintly, a lingering echo in his mind. It was no longer just a melody. It was a message, a quiet challenge to the life he had built. Michael exhaled, the sound barely audible. He should leave, he told himself. This moment was not his to witness, and yet he stayed, rooted by a force stronger than curiosity. He didn't understand why, but he knew this night was chiseling at the walls around his heart. Brick by brick, Naomi opened her eyes, lifting them to meet her mother's. The older woman smiled weakly, a glow of love and resilience shining through the weariness of sickness. Naomi squeezed her hand gently, and for a fleeting second Michael imagined what it might feel like to hold a hand, not out of obligation, but out of love. He stepped back into the shadowed hallway, heart pounding. The quiet devotion he had witnessed pierced through the loneliness he had long mistaken for independence. As he turned away, the faint scent of their simple meal followed him, carrying with it a truth he could no longer ignore. His empire might command the world, but it had never touched the depth of a single whispered prayer. Michael's hand tightened on the doorframe before he finally stepped inside. The soft creak of the hinge broke the fragile silence, and both women jerked their heads toward the sound. Naomi's eyes widened, startled, while her mother's thin fingers instinctively tightened around her daughter's hand. The hymn that had filled the room moments ago dissolved into uneasy stillness. Naomi sprang to her feet, her chair scraping against the linoleum. "Mr. Trent," she said quickly, her voice caught between fear and formality. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know anyone else was here." Michael cleared his throat, straightening his shoulders as if slipping back into the armor of authority. "This floor is usually empty after hours," he said, his tone clipped and businesslike. "Employees aren't permitted to bring guests without clearance." Naomi swallowed hard but held his gaze. "Yes, sir. I understand. I stayed late to finish the financial summaries for tomorrow's meeting. I didn't want to miss the deadline." Her eyes flicked briefly to the older woman beside her. "My mother isn't well. I couldn't leave her alone tonight, so I brought her here." "I'm sorry if that breaks protocol." The mother, frail but dignified, attempted to rise, but Naomi placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's all right, Mama," she whispered. Michael shifted his weight, discomfort prickling beneath his tailored suit. The words he had prepared, stern warnings about company policy, suddenly felt hollow. He glanced at the small meal on the table, the oxygen tube looping delicately along the mother's cheek, the faint tremor in her hands. The scene felt painfully human, far removed from the glossy numbers and sterile meetings that filled his life. "Is she—" "All right?" he asked, his voice softer than intended. Naomi hesitated, then nodded. "She has a lung condition. The treatments help, but in-home care is expensive. I can't afford it right now." The simple admission hung in the air like a challenge. Michael's mind flickered through the company's balance sheets, millions flowing in and out daily. Yet here was one of his own employees unable to pay for basic care. He searched for a response, but the usual language of business failed him. "You shouldn't have to work this late," he finally said, retreating to the safety of professional concern. "We have policies for overtime." "You could have asked for help." Naomi gave a small, measured smile. "Help is expensive too, sir, and time is precious." Her voice carried no bitterness, only quiet fact. "I stay late so I can keep my job secure." "This job means everything to us." Michael felt an unexpected heat rise in his chest. He had built his fortune on the belief that money solved problems, that hard work equaled reward. Yet standing here, he saw someone who worked harder than most of his executives. Someone who possessed a strength he could neither buy nor replicate. He glanced at the mother again, noticing the faint sparkle of pride in her weary eyes as she looked at her daughter. There was no trace of complaint, only gratitude. It unsettled him. Michael began, then stopped. He was unused to conversations without clear objectives, to moments where silence spoke louder than words. "You shouldn't have to choose between your job and caring for your mother," he said finally. "There must be other options." Naomi's smile widened, though it held a quiet sadness. "Options require resources, sir. We take what we're given and make it work. That's all anyone can do." Her calm acceptance pressed against something raw inside him. He had spent his life accumulating power so he would never again feel small or helpless. Yet here stood a young woman, with no wealth or influence, whose spirit towered over his own. The air between them shifted. This was no longer a conversation between employer and employee. It was something deeper, an unspoken recognition of two different worlds colliding. Michael, with his empire of numbers, and Naomi, with her unshakable faith and quiet resilience. Michael's eyes dropped to the table, where their modest meal sat untouched, still warm. He imagined the prayers that had wrapped around it moments before he entered. A strange envy flickered through him, envy for the strength it took to find gratitude in struggle. for the kind of richness that no amount of money could purchase. He cleared his throat, desperate to reclaim some sense of control. "I'll make sure the reports are ready for tomorrow," he said, though the words felt meaningless. His gaze lingered on Naomi a moment longer. "You've done excellent work, Naomi. I see that now." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, surprised by the rare compliment, but she only nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Trent." Michael turned toward the door, his pulse unsteady. Behind him, Naomi resumed her seat beside her mother, their hands quietly entwining once more. As he stepped back into the hallway, he realized the balance of power had shifted. He might sign her paycheck, but she possessed something far greater, an inner wealth that made his millions feel small. The door closed softly behind him, but the image lingered, a daughter and mother, bound by faith and love, richer in spirit than he had ever been. The echo of their quiet strength followed him down the empty corridor, unsettling and undeniable. A truth he could neither escape nor forget. Michael lingered near the doorway, his eyes drawn to the notebook resting on the table beside Naomi. A small, worn photograph was clipped to the cover. A man with kind eyes, slightly stooped shoulders, holding a little girl on his lap. Naomi glanced down at it as if remembering something sacred. Michael's breath caught. "Your father?" he asked quietly. Naomi nodded. "Yes, sir. He passed a few years ago. Cancer. It took him quickly." Her voice was soft, almost reverent. "He taught me about honesty, work, and faith. I try to carry that with me every day." Michael's chest tightened as he stared at the photo. The image dredged memories he had long buried. A small apartment lit by a single lamp, his widowed mother moving between jobs, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. He remembered nights spent with an empty stomach, listening to the muffled hum of the city outside, wondering if tomorrow would bring work, food, hope. For years he had suppressed that vulnerability beneath ambition, vowing he would never feel powerless again. Yet here, in this quiet break room, the echoes of that past pressed against him. Naomi's eyes met his, gentle and steady. "Some nights I pray not for riches," she said. "I pray for strength, for peace, for the courage to keep going, even when the world feels heavy." Her words were like a soft mirror, reflecting the boy he once was. Michael felt a knot in his chest loosen slightly, though it was accompanied by a pang of shame. He had spent decades building walls around himself, towering offices, wealth, a reputation, only to find that the world outside his empire still bore the same struggles he had once known. Her perseverance, her faith, and her quiet courage were a reminder of all he had tried to forget. "I remember those nights," he admitted, his voice low, almost hesitant. "When my mother, she worked double shifts. Sometimes we had nothing for dinner. I would lie awake, listening to her footsteps, hoping she would come home safe, hoping for anything." His words faltered, the carefully constructed armor of professionalism cracking in the dim light. Naomi's hand rested briefly on the table, her gaze unwavering. "It's not easy, is it? To hold on to hope when life feels unfair?" "No," Michael said, his eyes dropping to the floor. "It's not." A long silence settled over the room. The faint hum of the office ventilation was the only sound, and yet it felt intimate, almost sacred. For the first time, Michael allowed himself to be vulnerable. He spoke of moments of despair he had buried beneath ambition, of nights when he had felt utterly powerless despite the world thinking he was destined for greatness. Naomi listened quietly, never interrupting, never judging. Her presence itself was a balm, a quiet acknowledgement that someone could bear witness without expectation. "I thought that if I controlled everything, I could erase that fear," Michael confessed, finally meeting her eyes. "I thought success could protect me. But sometimes, I wonder if it has only made me blind." Naomi's lips curved into a small, understanding smile. "Faith doesn't promise comfort," she said. "It promises perseverance. It reminds you that even in the dark, you are not alone." Her words reverberated through him. He thought of his skyscrapers, his accounts, his accolades, all impressive, all hollow. And then he looked at Naomi and her mother, surviving with so little, yet richer in spirit than he had ever been. The stark contrast between their lives and his own success struck him with a force he could not ignore. For a moment, the break room ceased to be just a corporate space. It became a confessional, a sanctuary where wealth and struggle, power and humility collided. Michael felt the weight of the choices he had made, the humanity he had sacrificed in pursuit of dominance. He questioned whether ambition had cost him more than it had ever gained. Naomi clasped her mother's hand again, a small gesture of devotion that spoke louder than any sermon or lecture. Michael's chest ached with longing, for connection, for understanding, for the simplicity of gratitude he had forgotten. He leaned back against the doorway, his mind spinning with memories and realizations. The photograph of Naomi's father, the soft glow of the light, the prayerful murmur of the two women, it all pressed against him, demanding reflection. He realized that this encounter was more than an interruption of his night. It was a confrontation with his own life, a mirror held up to the choices and compromises that had defined him. The room pulsed with quiet power, a testament to resilience and faith. Michael knew, deep down, that the life he had meticulously built, filled with riches and accolades, had never offered him this kind of richness. The richness of the human spirit, the courage to persevere, and the quiet grace that Naomi and her mother embodied. As he stepped toward the door, the hum of the office felt distant, almost irrelevant. Outside, the world continued as it always had, but inside him, a change had begun. He had glimpsed a wealth far greater than money, and it unsettled him profoundly, planting the seed of a transformation he could no longer ignore. The building clock struck midnight, its soft chime echoing through the empty halls, mingling with the faint hum of the ventilation system. Michael sat in one of the worn chairs beside Naomi and her mother. The sterile corporate walls somehow transformed into a sacred space, heavy with quiet devotion and shared vulnerability. The small foil-wrapped meal sat untouched on the table between them. Yet it no longer seemed insignificant. It radiated warmth, care, and resilience that money could never buy. Michael cleared his throat, struggling to find the words that could bridge the worlds between them. "Naomi, I want to help," he said finally. "I can arrange better medical care for your mother. Private nurses, full-time support, anything you need." Naomi's hand rested over her mother's, a subtle shield of pride. She shook her head slowly. "Sir, thank you truly. But we don't need charity. Faith and what little we have carried us this far. We manage." Michael's chest tightened. He had expected gratitude, perhaps tears of relief, maybe even dependence. Instead, he faced calm dignity, unyielding and quietly proud. He realized suddenly that this moment was not about giving in the sense he understood, transactional, financial, superficial. This was about connection, about respect, about seeing and valuing another human being fully. "I see that now," he said softly, his voice betraying the tremor of unfamiliar emotion. "It's not about money. It's about opportunity, recognition, the life you deserve, the respect your work earns." He paused, letting the words sink into the silence. "I want to create opportunities for growth here. Fair wages, mentorship, a culture where employees are seen, not just numbers. Where work is valued and people matter as much as profit." Naomi blinked, her eyes searching his face for any trace of false intent. Michael's gaze was steady, open, almost vulnerable. He swallowed hard, continuing. "I envy you," he admitted, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Your faith, your strength, the courage to keep going despite everything. I've spent my life pursuing success, wealth, control. And yet, I don't think I've ever been this strong." The mother's frail hand squeezed Naomi's, as if acknowledging Michael's words. Naomi's lips curved in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Strength is not measured in money," she said softly. "It's measured in perseverance, in love, in faith." Michael leaned back, taking a slow breath. For decades, he had believed wealth was the ultimate power, a shield against vulnerability. But sitting here, surrounded by two women who possessed far less materially yet radiated a richness he could not touch, he felt the first true stirrings of humility in years. The hum of the office faded into the background, leaving only the soft rhythm of their breathing and the faint ticking of the clock. Michael allowed himself to drop the pretense of authority entirely. He spoke not as a CEO commanding an empire, but as a man confronting the emptiness of his own life, recognizing the potential for something different. "All of this, it's a choice," he said, gesturing broadly at the room, at the fragile meal, at their quiet devotion. "I can continue on the path I've always taken, insulated by wealth and control, or I can choose differently. I can use what I have not to dominate, but to uplift." To create meaning rather than just profit. Naomi's eyes glistened with understanding. Meaning is found in how we treat each other, she said simply. Not in how much we take. Michael nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He had spent a lifetime building walls, acquiring accolades, creating an empire of influence. But the walls had left him isolated, the accolades empty, and the empire devoid of human warmth. In this small, dimly lit break room, he glimpsed a different path. A life where power served connection, not dominance, where success was measured by impact, not numbers. He reached forward, placing a hand lightly on the table between them. Then that is what I choose, he said firmly yet softly. I choose transformation over transaction, connection over control, meaning over empty wealth. And I want you to be part of that change, Naomi. The mother nodded, a quiet blessing passing in her gaze. Naomi's fingers brushed his in a subtle acknowledgement, and the moment stretched, heavy with significance. In that instant, the sterile office had become a crucible for change, a turning point, not just for Michael, but for the culture he had built, and for the lives he now vowed to honor. The clock chimed again, marking midnight, but this time it sounded different, less like time passing, and more like a door opening. Michael felt it deep within himself. The path to true wealth was no longer lined with money, but with empathy, faith, and shared humanity. And for the first time in years, he felt whole. Weeks later, the company cafeteria buzzed with a new energy. The hum of conversation, the clatter of utensils, and the soft laughter of employees filled the space in a way that had never existed before. Bulletin boards displayed notices of family support programs, wellness initiatives, and opportunities for mentorship, projects funded and inspired by Michael himself. Naomi moved through the room with a quiet confidence, greeting co-workers as they approached her for guidance and support. She had been appointed to lead the new diversity and wellness program, her voice now carrying influence in a way that amplified the very values she had lived by. Resilience, faith, and compassion. Michael watched from a distance for a moment, a faint smile touching his lips. Gone was the rigid, untouchable figure of authority he had once been. Today he moved with humility, his presence warm rather than imposing. When he approached Naomi in a quieter corner of the cafeteria, she looked up, surprised, but pleased. Her mother sat beside her, a gentle smile on her face, eyes reflecting both pride and curiosity. There was no need for introductions or explanations. They had already shared moments that transcended titles and offices, moments that had redefined the very nature of connection between them. Michael, Naomi greeted softly, standing to shake his hand before guiding him to the small table. I'm glad you're here, he chuckled, lowering into the chair across from them. I wouldn't miss it. For the first time, he felt no pretense, no expectation, only presence. He observed the subtle changes, the mother's steady breathing, supported by proper care now, the quiet joy that radiated from Naomi as she interacted with her colleagues, and the glow of gratitude that filled the space around them. After a brief, comfortable silence, Naomi spoke. Would you join us in prayer? She asked, her voice gentle. Not for money, not for favors, just for gratitude, strength, and love. Michael hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded. He bowed his head as Naomi reached across the table to clasp both his and her mother's hands. The warmth of their grip was immediate and grounding, a tactile reminder of the bond formed through shared vulnerability and mutual respect. Thank you, Naomi whispered, for giving us the strength to face each day, for guiding us through struggles, and for the love that surrounds us in unexpected ways. Help us to see each other with compassion, to lift those who need it, and to never forget the small blessings that truly matter, her mother added softly. Amen. Michael felt a wave of peace wash over him, deeper than any satisfaction derived from business triumphs or financial victories. His chest loosened from the tension he had carried for decades, the relentless pursuit of success replaced by something richer, the simple, profound contentment of shared humanity. Here, in the warmth of a quiet corner, surrounded by faith and resilience, he understood what he had long ignored. True wealth was not measured in accounts or assets, but in moments like these, in the bonds that connected one soul to another. He squeezed Naomi's hand gently and spoke softly. I think I've been looking for this all along, not in numbers or reports, but in moments like this, in connection, in faith, in love. Naomi's eyes glimmered, and her mother smiled knowingly. They had witnessed his transformation, and now it was tangible, a presence of humility and reverence that neither money nor power could have inspired. The cafeteria around them seemed to fade, leaving only the three of them, bound by trust, understanding, and the quiet strength of shared prayer. Outside, the city lights flickered, a mosaic of human lives continuing in their rhythm. Yet inside that small corner, time itself seemed suspended. The three hands remained joined, glowing softly under the warm overhead light, a symbol of redemption, of lessons learned, and of the richness that could never be bought. Michael exhaled slowly, a soft smile spreading across his face. For the first time, he felt whole. The relentless chase for power and wealth now seemed hollow compared to this simple, profound truth. Success, he realized, meant nothing without a soul to share it with. And in that moment, the audience could see it, the final, cinematic image, three hands clasped over a modest table, city lights twinkling outside, hearts bound not by money but by faith, gratitude, and the unshakable strength of human connection. The lesson was clear and undeniable. True wealth is found not in what we own, but in what we give and share, and the love that endures beyond it all.